Good morning. Andres, you said, no panel without AI. Now the IIS dedicated a whole panel to it. And we're going to build on what you and your fellow colleagues said earlier and really try to dig deeper, because it is, of course, both a hype, but also a new era that we need to cope with. And I'm very happy to have a very diverse panel today. If I just briefly introduce, we have Caroline, Dean of the Master's Program at the University of St. Gallen and also leading on strategy and innovation. We have Petter, who brings a combined career in innovation and reinsurance from RGA. Melissa, who really at Baltec tries to create the insurance company of the future. And then Mark, from a new, or relatively new compared to the 100-plus-year-old incumbents, a new way of doing specialty insurance and bring the business side. Wonderful to have you all. So we have the full mix of insurance, innovation, academia, and technology. Maybe to get started, we're going to group it into four broad blocks. We'll talk a little bit about what are the contours, because everybody talks about this AI, but what is it really? And should we bother? Where should we bother? Then we go into if we imagine an AI-enabled insurance company of the future, what would that really be? We heard some comments in the earlier panel around, that Terry, I think you said it, it could be a massive game changer. What is it? How would we visualize it? Then we go into how we actually get there, because it is a journey, and probably we overestimate the pace of 1 year and we underestimate the pace on a decade. So we'll talk about what it takes for leaders, what it takes in really changing the workflows to bring the technology to impact. And then at the end, we're going to make it personal. Throughout the panel, I invite you, we're going to do also a Q&A at the last third or so of the session. So please also raise your hands if you want to share comments and questions to the panel. With that, let's get started. And maybe, Petra, you have committed your career to innovation, AI, analytics. You've been on this for many, many years. Help us get the contours right between, AI, then we heard traditional machine learning, traditional analytics, advanced analytics, then we now hear agentic AI, et cetera, et cetera. So what is it really, and what is, in your view, more the buzz side and the hype, and what is really the part that we should be focused on as insurance leaders?
Thank you, Bernhard, and good morning. So from my perspective, we've been using AI for decades as insurers. Obviously starting with more classical AI, machine learning, so on, to do things like predictive underwriting, claims triage, pricing, and so on. Gen AI, for a lot of people think Gen AI sort of was invented by OpenAI 3 years ago. It's not really the case. It's been around for more than 10 years. I've been using it from 2015, 2016. I'm sure all of you have been using it as well, maybe unknowingly, in the last 10 years, if you used Google Translate, for example. So again, it's not something new, but what's, in my opinion, new is the fact that now it has made things a lot more accessible. In the past, AI was usually that little corner room with no windows, with some PhD sort of candidate sitting in, doing some interesting things that no one really understood. And now, actually, all of us have access to Gen AI on our phones, and we've seen it, how that can help. When we were discussing it earlier, I think what has happened recently is that a lot of people have been trying to use Gen AI on many different things, running hundreds of potential POCs, but not really getting the value. I think we mentioned things like, now there was, I think MIT released like a paper where they said 90% of initiatives result in no value. Is it surprising to me? I don't think so. My reaction to it is also that I've seen this pattern happening in the past with data science, with advanced analytics, with data mining, and so on. And I think it comes down to the fact that we over-index on technology and sort of focus less on people, process, and culture in really to truly drive the impact. So to give you an example, like at RGA, 15, 18 months ago, we went around the building to try to understand all of the different use cases for Gen AI. We've identified probably 150 of them. 60 of them had nothing to do with AI, or Gen AI specifically. It was just people magically thinking that if you sprinkle a bit of AI, it will fix their process or just do something. Out of the 90-ish, then you could whittle it down to maybe like 10 use case groups. And out of those, for us, only really 3 matter. The first one is around biometric risk expertise. It's our super weapon at RGA. We're the best when it comes to understanding mortality, morbidity risk. We've been investing very heavily in there. Now, thanks to AI, we found novel ways how to use your banking transactions, the amount of vegetables you eat, the amount of your resting heart rate, and really apply it in our pricing and underwriting and make financial insurance or financial protection a lot more accessible. The second use case, I'll call it document intelligence. I think within your companies, you wouldn't be surprising that maybe 95% of your data is stored in structured data sources, documents, contracts, and so on. And this is where GenAI plays a big role. Recently, in the US, the Department of Justice issued this data bill, which required us to basically go through thousands of our treaties and read them as if we were lawyers and create sort of assessments. And do it within a few months. And it was a humanly impossible task, but now with AI, we're able to do it. We're able to do it not just once, but continuously. Mm-hmm. And the third use case for us is around execution excellence, really unlocking thousands of person days in productivity gains across the entire value chain. Yes, maybe focusing on operations, administration, underwriting, but we've seen a lot of good use cases when it comes to our pricing, business development, analyzing clients' information, statements, analyst reports, and really getting intelligence. So for me, AI has been around for a long time. I think it just really requires us to focus our minds on what really matters in order to drive the impact.
Thank you, Petra. And what you said is it is a wider effort of innovation. So, Carolyn, you have committed a good part of your career to innovation. What would be your counsel on how also business leaders here in the room can really drive that innovation? And what part is different when we think of AI relative to other parts of innovation that I'm sure you have researched on at university?
Thank you for the question. I've been studying innovation for like the last 15 years, and I've really observed organizations that really managed to transform their organization significantly and others that didn't. And the challenge really is it's not we overestimate technology, it has been said earlier, but it's really not necessarily about the technology, it's really about the business model that you need to think about. So how does AI or Gen AI now really disrupt the business model? So one model that really helps a lot and came out of my research is thinking about the 2 S-curves. And I really love it because it's so easy, but it's so powerful. So when you think about the first S-curve, it's kind of your current business, and you can use AI in order to make things easier, more efficient, more productive, et cetera, et cetera. But this does not change the fundamental underlying logic of your business. This is the second S-curve, and this is where it gets really interesting. So what does AI or Gen AI really does to your business model? How does it change the business model, the underlying logic? And there is really where it gets interesting and where we really see the huge value out of AI. But this is super, super difficult, especially for incumbent organizations, because you're so much into the DNA of your existing business. You said it earlier, Andreas, we need to unlearn what we have learned and what we have done perfectly over the last years or decades. And now we need to unlearn it and really think about how can we disrupt the business model of the insurance industry. And this is not easy because you have those current processes, you have the current structure, you have the current knowledge, you have your employees, but now you need to change everything. And this is where the real disruption starts. And if you think about the industry, now we have a lot of insured techs. It's kind of the first wave. You can say it's a bubble because not a lot of them are successful, but also a lot of them are only focusing on the first S-curve. And here's not where the real value is, but the real value is in the second S-curve. But that makes it very difficult. And how to do that? Probably not within your established organization. Maybe you need to think about startups, creating something on the green field to really let go the existing dominant logic, but really think about it in a different way, in a radical way, in a new way. And this is how we should do it, or how leaders should tackle it.
So Petra, it sounds like the 3 big cases you described are still in the first S-curve, but maybe the last one in terms of how you rethink pricing and products could be the beginnings of a second S-curve. Melissa, Boltec has tried to, of course, reimagine insurance, and to some extent, if I quote Carolyn, to go to the second S-curve. Mm-hmm. Where does AI come into this? I mean, Boltec was founded certainly before the hype started, of course, all sorts of advanced analytics have been around. What is now different?
Yeah, I would actually question that, actually. We're 5 years old, so I would say as a company, as an entity itself, we're probably younger than the AI kind of, hype or phase. And I mean, as an insurtech, as a digital native, we really have, I guess, the opportunity to cherry pick the areas that we feel that we would like to undertake. And in 5 years, we've had an enormous amount of learning, right? Even just within our own hero products, as well as working together with both the distribution, traditional and non-traditional, as well as with the supply side, so the insurers, the carriers. I would say there are 3 areas that we've kind of narrowed down on, and it's all it's been through learning and prioritization. Really, really critical, portfolio view of the way that we even look at AI across an insurtech. The first area is no surprise, and it's probably in the first S-curve, I'm afraid. It's quite boring and unsexy, is in the claims operational efficiency area. I think the interesting thing, and it's been touched upon a little bit across the last couple of days, is that as we started that problem statement within a very kind of specific device insurance use case, we started out with kind of, traditional kind of predictive models, machine learning. But the real interesting aspects of that is in the last kind of 1 to 2 years with generative, with agentic. Now it's actually becoming really able to touch upon every aspect of what I call the claims value chain. So that's the probably first one, and in the first S-curve. The last 2, I think, are really, and this is kind of my space and where I get quite happy and quite passionate, is one is, how do you fundamentally change the TAM? How can you make the pie bigger in terms of increasing the distribution and trying to address the real protection gaps that our industry faces? And that's everything from, we talked yesterday about kind of pension to kind of life insurance gap in the US, all the way through to kind of penetration of insurance in Philippines, where we're based as well, with a less than 2% insurance penetration. So, these kind of problem statements are fascinating, and actually AI, I think, can really try and make a difference in how it is we fundamentally change the business model. One such example is one of the most uninsured or hard to insure areas in the world is Florida. We've been actually working really, really hard to create IoT-enabled kind of sensors, and with our own proprietary technology, kind of wrapping that ecosystem to be able to trigger when there's a potential kind of water leak, and then use that to actually trigger assistance. And potentially, and we've actually proven through our own MGA in Florida to be able to actually reduce the attritional loss. That to me is fundamentally changing the way we do insurance. And then in the other space is the areas around how we underwrite. So we work a lot with big non-traditional distributors of insurance like telcos. The traditional telco space, where they've always been able to insure, say, the devices at the point of sale. They can even get a kind of 40 to 50% kind of attached, unheard of. But what about the other 50%? And it's actually the non-traditional distributors of insurance that are really pushing us to innovate using AI, using and different predictive kind of, and even computer vision, another buzzword, but one that's really quite practical, to be able to underwrite and diagnose a phone remotely and digitally. So there's kind of maybe 3 areas that are quite different, but areas that we've really focused and addressed.
So it sounds, Melissa, that really you're quite bullish that with AI and everything that comes under that umbrella, we have an ability to really build that second S-curve for insurance, which indeed would be needed, because when we look at it, global insurance is growing slower than the real economy. So we are actually widening the gaps relative. And then when I look at a very simple analysis on productivity, actually the sector has been pretty stagnant on productivity. So there is also a real challenge on how we get more efficient. Mark, if I can turn to you, Convex has set out an ambition to really be part of that second S-curve and reimagine insurance. As you listen to this as a business leader, what is the underlying drivers that you have embedded in your business to get on that journey, and what role does AI play in this?
So I think the way I think about it, there's something people call the wisdom hierarchy. I don't know if folks have, data, information, knowledge, insight, foresight. And I think the role today for AI is basically getting to the positive surface of knowledge. And some of the themes that we've already talked about sort of represent that. So how can we quickly create knowledge out of unstructured documents and put them in front of decision makers to apply judgment to get to insight and foresight? I think there's another theme, and people say, what's your AI strategy? And I sort of push back on that a little bit, and building from what Mark was saying, if you were building a house, you wouldn't sit there and say, what's your table saw strategy? What are the outcomes you're trying to achieve? Yeah. How can you improve your customers and brokers' lives through the use of tools? And there's no question this is transformative, but you really need to be led by the business and improving your brokers' and customers' lives, I think.
So if I paraphrase this first round of your comments, and coming back to the question of our panel, harnessing the power of AI and data, I hear all of you pretty bullish. All of you saying it has been around, it must be business-led. It can help on the first S-curve of our current business, but it really, really can shape a new S-curve for the sector. But that takes a lot. Now, I'd love to, in the next round, go a little bit into further detail of that second S-curve. And maybe, Melissa, I start with you, because you laid out a couple of examples, but it was still parts of the business. It was still a new way of doing claims, a new way of doing pricing, a new way of structuring risk. If you think even bigger, help us visualize the contours of an AI-driven insurance company if we have the 70th or 75th IIS forum. What would we see?
So maybe coming from kind of Boltec's perspective, it's important to set the context for us as an ecosystem. Right, so when we think about kind of AI-driven future of insurance, I think it's very, very hard to do that outside the ecosystem of what are the distributors doing, right? And how is distribution fundamentally changing? What are the end customers asking of distribution, right? I think that's a really, really critical point as well. And then the other point is around the product, the core fundamental products and supply itself. For us, we, as I've mentioned, we're in kind of 39 markets, right? So we're seeing every problem statement under the sun. And really, when we see what is the, I guess, in common theme that we're constantly seeing, whether it is in a very mature market like Switzerland through to say what I mentioned before, Philippines, the one common theme for me and I'll admit, I'm new to the insurance industry, right? I've only been with insurance for sort of 5-6 years as I've kind of come through with Boltec. One of the things, it was actually what Andreas mentioned before about the value prop to the end customer. It is an unnatural thing for people to think, I wake up every morning and think about the potential adverse events of my life and how I could potentially protect myself, right? So coming with that frame of mind, how is it that we rethink and reimagine the end customer's job to be done? Reimagine how it is that we can think through, shifting totally left and saying, how is it and what is it that they're trying to do? The end customer is trying to prevent adverse things from happening. They don't want the bad thing to happen, right? And they don't necessarily want to go through the pains of actually getting a reimbursement. So the way we think about, the real kind of 5 to 10 years of the future of insurance is really about shifting left and really caring about the preventative aspects, and then how that preventative aspect is actually going to leverage interesting data sets. Those data sets, they come from the ecosystem. They don't necessarily come from one particular insurer or one particular insurtech. They come from distribution. And with that, how is it that you can put together compelling, what I call end customer value props and customer journeys that are not unnatural to a customer to have to give up data, but actually potentially leverage data to help themselves. And one such area is actually in your space, Terry, in the cyber area. I feel that the cyber area is an area where every single one of us is exposed, whether we're mature digital natives or we're kind of leveraging and just being online. And in this area, with the power of the many different kind of models out there, we're able to actually predict how your data is being used, adversely. We're able to detect, say, for example, if your child is being bullied in social media, right, with generative models. And putting that together is a very compelling proposition for a customer to be able to be educated to say, hey, there is a risk out there. I see it every day. I get alerted about it. I actually I have a detection of my data being used adversely at least twice a month or once a week. And with that, they actually understand the risks. So we're educating the end customer to our industry. We're bringing it closer and making it entirely more accessible for our industry. So that's kind of our future kind of vision.
I really like this. Maybe to comment on the S curves, I always sort of wonder, do you have to get the first one right and then you jump onto the second one? Can you run them in parallel? But a lot of the focus that we have at RGA obviously involves having to engage internal claims assessor, underwriters, pricing, actuaries, and so on. So we're not even talking about changes in behaviors that we would like from our customers. We actually are looking at our internal employees, and can we go on a journey where we start reimagining what the future could look like with the proposition? Can we imagine a world where digital underwriting is replaced by AI that is able to underwrite 1 billion in gross written premiums, maybe some human oversight? But how do you do that with people who obviously have spent a lot of time in this area, have crafted their knowledge? And we've seen it in some cases. I think several years ago, we introduced this tool that is able to read general practitioners' sort of health records, 300 pages, handwritten notes, graphs about person's history, health, their family, and so on. Obviously, your underwriters usually sort of read this during their lunch breaks, late, early in the mornings, and so on. And you would think AI would be able to help with this, and it does. It can summarize, it can pick out the right stuff. But when we introduced it, there were groups of people, underwriters, who immediately jumped on it and started using it. But there was also a group of underwriters where we experienced what I would call negative efficiency gains, where they would not only read the summary, then they would read the entire 300 pages of case and try to find ways how to discredit or poke holes in it. Which, I mean, it was fine because it helped us to find things, fine-tune it, improve it. But still, there was this, and I understand it from person's perspective. Suddenly you're telling me AI can replace my job and can do it as well as I can. Sometimes it's also difficult to, with underwriters, if you give them a case, to agree on what the outcome is. But I'm thinking how can we bring these people on this journey? And often the approach is to pick your champions, your early adopters in the business. But I've also found it useful sometimes to pick the biggest skeptics. And if you can take them on the journey and help them co-develop this, I think you can go on this journey when it comes to S-curves, but I would be quite curious to understand what might be the success factors, or do you need completely different people and solve it in isolation?
No, thank you, and we'll come to that in a minute, Carolyn. I'm going to ask you, but I want to make sure we register, Melissa, what you described as a vision for an AI-led insurance, because I noted down it would be embedded in the ecosystem, which I think also in the earlier panel was there. So insurance cannot exist on its own. It is an enabler for society. It's an enabler for the economy. So how can that work better? Then you emphasized the power of prevention, whether it's preventive care, preventive risk management, but it would really change the dynamics as being a backstop for the customer to being a partner for the customer. I think it was a big French-based insurer that called it from payer to partner. That was many years ago. So maybe now with technology, we can get there actually. And then thirdly, you said a different level of engagement and a different level of emotional connectivity, that you really educate the customers. And it's not painful to read the terms and conditions, but actually it begins that you really have a positive relationship between the insured and the insurer. Yeah. So bit the vision. Mark, anything you'd like to add on that before we come more to the how and how do we drive the change journey to get there?
Yeah, I mean, just trying to think about the future a little bit. I remember there was a large fire loss with one of our large global clients. I think it was back in 2017. And the local management actually built the plant without following the guidelines. And you can imagine a world where you've got AI sitting on top of general ledger entries and just sort of monitoring for deviations. Yeah. Even though, you know, globally there's this risk management practice, local things aren't happening, but it's almost like the IoT of things, but for financial transactions. And then I think the other opportunity for us is to change the complex insurance relationship from this kind of annual cycle to much more a continuous relationship where the communications are around changes and going to prevention and risk insights. There's something happening in the marketplace, there's something happening with that specific client relative to peers. And the interactions are much more, delivering insights and service as opposed to, turning the annual crank sort of thing.
Very good. Let's talk about the change journey. We get to this wonderful world of being the partner of our customers in a fully engaged ecosystem where we help prevent rather than just take care when the damage happens. Carolyn, you introduced the two S-curves. Now, Petra asked an interesting question. Do you need to first fix the first S-curve before you can go to the second? Can you do it in parallel? Can you leapfrog? So that, I think, was one. And then the second big one is, how should business leaders, and we have here many, many in the room, how should they lead that change? Because, of course, there's resistance to it. There's the big fear. I mean, one of the big unspoken concerns about AI is, will it take away all our jobs? So, of course, if you all of a sudden should use these tools, people are getting nervous whether it would, in the end, replace themselves. What are some of what is some of the counsel that you'd like to give to business leaders in terms of how to lead that innovation?
Sure, happy to do so. So coming to the S-curves, it's a very clear message here. You can't do it one after the other. You have to do it in parallel. It's super important because you need both S-curves, and those companies who will lead in the innovation race and who will win kind of the AI challenge will be those companies who manage to lead and win on both S-curves in parallel. Because first, obviously, you need to improve your core business. You need to make it more efficient in order to compete with your competitors and to keep that competitive advantage. At the same time, you need to rethink your business model, and you need to do that in parallel. And these are big bets, and not all of them will be successful, obviously, because no one of us knows how the future will look like. It might be predictive, it might be agentic first, et cetera, but therefore you need to try it out, and the first and the second need to go in parallel, that's for sure. How do you do that? So for the first one, you need to get your best people to make processes more efficient, et cetera, but you all do that already. These are all the use cases you are working on. On the second one, it needs to go top down. That's very clear. You can't wait to get those use cases bottom up because you have so many use cases. We heard that earlier, just across the organization, 400,000 of use cases, but they are scattered across the organization, and you'll never win on the second S-curve if you keep it like that. Therefore, it needs to go top down. The CEO needs to lead it, and the CEO needs to have a team, ideally with outsiders, but also some insiders. So it's this fine combination of inside and outside talent that can really think about the insurance business model differently, that can revolutionize it, and that dares to think big. But at the same time, you need to have the internal knowledge to access the data, to access the competencies, the experience, and to bring this together and then to really think big and revolutionize the industry. And that's the challenge. And this, I really know a very few CEOs who really master that to the really top level. But only if you can do that, that you can win in the next age of AI.
A question on this. Who do you think owns AI in the organization? Is it the business? Is it the technology?
The business, for sure, the business.
I agree.
Because I'm currently working together with a big insurance company in Switzerland, and it has been driven by the CTO a lot, but you see the CTO always thinks about technology. The CTO believes technology will solve the problem for us. This will not be the case because the challenge, technology is already there. Technology is cheap, let's put it, it's a bit provocative, but we have all the technology that we need. But the really difficult thing is to apply the technology to the business problems that you have. Yeah. And this is so challenging. Therefore, it's not the CTO, it's ideally the CEO or kind of someone who helps the CEO to think it through.
Yeah. I think that's an important message. We heard it in the first panel. I think it's here very clear that to drive that change, it must be business-led and it must be really driven from the very top of the house. Yeah. I just need to ask that question, Caroline, because I've seen the data. Corporate business venturing is not exactly a very high odds of success.
Yeah.
How should business leaders deal with the risk appetite if they know they are playing basically a 1 in 3, 1 in 4 chance that corporate VCs really succeed? So the second S-curve, or is it almost accepting that, in the law of Schumpeter, at some point creative destruction may hit them, and it's more investing in other businesses to diversify?
Well, it's definitely about cannibalizing your own business, and you need to embrace this. You need to say, well, I know this will cannibalize our business, and I'm supporting that as a CEO. And then you need to have different initiatives, big initiatives, top-down initiatives, and obviously not all of them will be successful because none of us knows how the future looks like. And you have this 90-10, 90 probably will not be successful, but the 10% that will be successful are the ones that bring you on the next S-curve and will give you the innovation and competitive advantage in the future.
Wonderful. Mark, you're leading a business that is disrupting a very traditional part of the industry. Do you see yourself in the second S-curve, and how did you get there, and how do you see the next years evolving?
Yeah, I'm not sure I would see us in the second S-curve yet. I mean, I think we've been around for 6 years, and we luckily started without a lot of legacy and a very strong vision from our leaders that we didn't want to create that. I'm kind of with Andreas on how you make this work. The foundations have to make sense. And there's a concept that we call the single source of the useful. I think people talk about the single source of the truth a lot, which is a highly governed, this is where you're getting your regulatory reporting, your financial reporting, static management information. And people often try and put all of their data through those pipelines, which really just slows things down. It doesn't have to be as high quality and governed and slow moving as the single source of the truth. So having the single source of the useful, which is more dynamic and domain-driven, the local experts are setting up the data model. It'll change over time, structure on read rather than structure on write. But I think as you set yourself up for the second S-curve, you create those foundations to be able to do that. So that'd be some of the things that we're thinking about. I think the other element is incremental. I think Wile E. Coyote, somebody put it to me, he always has this invention that's going to get from, to the top of the canyon in one go. And you just want to be incremental in monitoring what's happening. And the reason I say we're not in the second S-curve is because we've really created the foundations outside of underwriting. And now we have around 366,000 hours of underwriters' time every year. How can we improve their efficiency with a mindset to increasing service and risk insights? So.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Melissa, we heard a lot about partnering, ecosystems. Now you are, of course, an ecosystem partner. How should insurers make that collaboration work effectively?
Yeah, I mean, it comes really back down to the business problems, I feel. We talk a lot about the future of insurance as an insurtech. But a lot of what we do fundamentally day to day is helping solve some of the more common business problems and efficiency issues that insurers have, right? And for us as a service provider to the ecosystem, what I call an orchestrator of the ecosystem, we do have to also have that portfolio approach, that portfolio management as well, and where we spend our time. And I'll give you a couple of examples on how you could think about it. So one area that we've come up with, and it makes me laugh a little bit about the kind of CTO versus business approach. One of the areas is like and this is I'm sorry if there are CTOs out there. One of my best allies in Voltec is our CTO. But one of the things is, do I have to make it myself? Do I have to build it myself? That mentality. And I think that comes very heavily with a technology kind of mindset. But if you sort of come and fundamentally pair it back to the business problem, how do you partner to actually look out there to see and assess, is there something better out there, something that you could do, you could experiment with faster, right, to solve some of your fundamental problems. And this is an area that we, as Bolt Tech, kind of work in that space. A great example, very similar to Key, but in a slightly, probably even more fundamental space, is just the pure digitization of agencies in the US, right? We just launched our agentic service suite. Really basic stuff. It's actually how do you leverage agentic to look at efficiencies in the inbound area of an agency, the outbound, so really just qualifying leads, being able to do renewals, and then in the areas of what we call kind of quoting and autonomous quoting. Very basic stuff, but it's a fundamental part of the core of our business as an insurtech. And then secondly, maybe, how do you partner to innovate? One of the things that we had to sort of grapple with ourselves were, well, what were those interesting sort of second S-curve areas that we wanted to focus on? And we came to the conclusion that we needed to probably really specialize in 2 to 3 value chains or focus areas. And with that, we feel that we've actually kind of built out a great capability in areas, say, for example, on the home IoT space or in the areas of embedded devices. But say for travel, we would never go down that space. We actually are happy to innovate along the entire value chain of even in the preventative models and the assistance areas. So I think that it's really about trying to find what is core to you, really discuss, what is the priority of what you can do yourself and then what you can partner to obtain.
Yeah, I would like to echo that, because I think the build versus buy decision has been extended to build, buy, partner.
Yeah.
And I think you have to rethink really who, not just from the technology point of view, but also on the implementation, consulting. And it can start all the way in the POC sort of area, where for us in the past, we used to do everything on our own. Quite a lot of times that didn't really work. But now even with POCs, especially the big roads where we know that they all drive values, we often now partner with our preferred technology vendors. It's not Bolt Tech, we don't work together, it's a disclaimer. But because I think with the POC, in my opinion, you don't want to just prove that there is a there, that this could work, but you actually want to end up with something that can take you then to the minimum viable product, and you can actually have something with it. So I think being able to kickstart this process, be a lot more agile and faster to delivery is very important, especially with things, how quickly they change, and also the executives demand to see ROI very quickly. So I think partnering is very important.
I tried to connect what you said earlier with a few big ones and that you needed to prune. And that's, of course, the big risk with POCs, that you have 1,000 flowers, but they produce cost, not value.
You want to water them.
So that choice then needs to be very fast and ruthless to prune and get to what Melissa said. We do home IoT, but we don't do travel. And that is, of course, important choices that need to be taken quickly. So what I hear is, it's also not that you described the full end-to-end future insurance company. You actually picked certain parts. Both Mark, you did this, as well as Melissa. Yeah. On the how, 2 themes that we, of course, need to discuss are the associated risks and talent. So let's first start with risk, and maybe, Petra, I can invite you as somebody that's very bullish about innovation, but at the same time, of course, you've seen a lot of the risk and the good, the bad, and the ugly. How should companies and business leaders manage the enormous risks that come with AI, whether it's hallucinations, data issues, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, it's quite a loaded question. I think there's a lot to cover. In my opinion, technology side of things, like hallucinations, that's being worked on. The models now are better when it comes to not hallucinating. There's ways how you can reduce that by applying the right techniques. Same some of the data privacy, security concerns. They're not just specific to AI, they're just general sort of good hygiene, so you can tackle them. And there's a lot of the discourse around using AI in a safe and responsible way. And I think it goes beyond that question, how you use AI. It's just as a business, what you're trying to do. And if you're really focusing on doing good, I think you will find ways how to use AI in the right way and where it should not be used. So I personally do not really lose my sleep over all of this AI regulation frameworks that are coming out, because I think we're a heavily regulated industry already. We sort of know how to deal with it, and the EU AI Act and similar like NIST framework, ISO 42001, just adds another layer that we just have to go through and introduce some best practices, but which we are used to. Yeah. But I think the major risk that I see, and we've talked about it quite a lot, and we'll continue talking about it, is around people's potential resistance to change and how you take people on the journey with you. And from my perspective, education has played a big role when it comes to explaining to people what AI can do, what it cannot do. How do you make sure that all of your employees can prompt effectively so they don't get disappointed or they don't get hallucinations? But yeah, there's a lot to cover and there's no silver bullet.
Yeah. So Petra, I'm going to use your quite optimistic stand, if I may say, on the risks of AI to really also invite the audience here. We have about 10 minutes. Would love to have questions, comments, feedback, maybe some challenging if Petra's view on we have the models under control is maybe overly optimistic. While we wait for the first questions and comments to come, I'd love to take the talent question, and talent, both change management in the existing talent as well as talent that we need to bring in. Maybe I start with you. Given you teach the future generations of leaders, if you can help us reflect a little bit on what does it mean for talent development, and then also what do you see in companies on how they could manage that change?
Well, what is important, obviously, is lifelong learning. You already said that, or that you continuously educate your teams, your organizations, so that they always have the capabilities that are needed in order to tackle the challenges that we do have. I guess for the younger generation, it's a bit related to your question, it's also a big challenge right now because so many things are changing in the industries, and with all the AI and agentic AI coming into organization, especially the entry jobs are often getting wiped out. So I see a lot of talent at my university who graduate and then really find challenges to finding the right job. So I guess this is the downside of AI, because especially for the younger generation, a lot can be replaced by AI, and then we need more senior talent, but then how to train the senior talent if they don't have the chance to do the entry-level jobs. So decision-making in the future will be very challenging because we are facing an age where we don't have people who really learned it from the ground, and then they have to take those serious decisions, and the world gets more and more ambiguous. So it really, on a society level, I do think we face a real challenge. Talents that are not that well educated because they didn't have the chance to experience it, a world that gets more ambiguous in the future, and then maybe a generation that comes in that thinks, oh, I just take the decision because AI tells me what to do, and then I just take the decision for my organization. I think society-wise, this will be a big challenge. So that's more a broader answer. But then coming back to your question, I guess we have to educate our organization. And yeah, it is a threat, AI, but maybe with those double S-curves, you could always say, well, we are also working on the second one. And if we are successful on the second one, there's also an opportunity for the employees to move at some point to the second one. It's also this opportunity and this positivism that you also have to share with the organization.
I would like to add on the younger generations. Well, I started my career in consulting in the first year. The only thing I was doing was writing meeting minutes. So I really hope that future generations will not have to be doing that, and they will be listening, trying to do something more of a value add. But I also think now with the younger generations, they're so used to using AI, and you can see it like when students go from school to holidays, the ChatGPT consumption drops by 2-3 times. But so they are AI native, they've been using it sometimes maybe for good reasons, sometimes for wrong reasons, but they're expecting when they enter the workforce that we will be in a positions that we will give them the right tools and they will be using this. But now I think we're in this area where we have people with actuarial backgrounds, but who know data science, know how to use AI, come in and we basically tell them, okay, here's your spreadsheet in Excel. This is how we're doing pricing, and this is what you will be asked to do. So we not only have to create this sort of environment where they will be incentivized to apply their knowledge, work in the right way, but we also need to work on our, let's say, middle management, senior management to adopt new ways of doing things. Otherwise, we might be at the risk where we just not be able to attract the tier one talent. We will be getting not even B, maybe C, D type of level talent into the organization because we will not be able to give them not just the tools, but the right problems to focus on.
So here are two big things. The first one, of course, what are we doing? How do we apprentice next generations of leaders? The second one, then, how do we change and adopt the current talent and make sure that there's this lifelong learning, as well as how do organizations then function? I mean, one thing we observe in our firm with clients is managerial spans, you know, there were these traditional numbers, 1 to 10, 1 to 12. We now see organizations can go to 1 to 20, 1 to 25, because with the technology support, actually the effectiveness of an AI-enabled leader can be very different, and there's much more time to really spend with people rather than spend on administration, which is much less productive as a people leader. Okay. Questions? Andres.
We had the same issue with modeling. So we had people who were overly relying on models. And AI, I can see similar things. How do you tackle this challenge to promote this critical thinking? And we always call it professional skepticism also in this whole field.
Yeah. Maybe, Mark, do you want to
Yeah,
challenge in your organization?
I think you have to change your perspective from, you know, I use these tools to get the right answer, to I will get the wrong answer, and what are the implications of getting the wrong answer, and how can I make my portfolio more resilient for a range of wrong answers? And I think these tools do give you, and interesting, you know, you think, what's the objective function for a company like Convex? The profit you can make from a client. Well, actually, there's various different ways to look at that. You've just had a major California wildfire that has impacted your historical profitability. What does that mean going forward? And even a decile ranking of profitability, you'd get different answers. And I think the tools can give you a speed of different answers, and you kind of want to look at that in a suite of possibilities and build portfolio resilience as opposed to I'm right.
And we're also changing how we teach and what we teach at the university, because teaching just knowledge is gone, so we can't teach Porter's 5 forces or stuff like that anymore. It's really about teaching. Everyone can look it up, but it's really about teaching this critical thinking skill, and we are still in the process of figuring that out, how to best do it. But we have tons of discussions on that in the university leadership team, how to best do that. But we're also going through a fundamental transformation in universities.
Maybe just to add a little bit on this as well, I totally agree, Mark, around kind of reshaping what I would call the focus. And a lot of the kind of young talent that comes through our world, they come from technology, and then they come from insurance, right? So there's like the basics of the two fundamentals to make up an insurtech. And actually, one of the first things that we do is we will take them through basics of pricing models and the basics of the core business, but we will give them 50% of the time actually with the biggest challenges that we face. Right, being able to actually provide them that diversity of portfolio as well, even at your youngest and most junior staff. I think that this is how we also reshape thinking, right? And then the other piece, apart from just insurance and technology kind of talent, this concept of multifunctional. So to your point about the 20 to 1. This is the flattening of the hierarchies is because functions are becoming more, I guess, unified. Multifunctional teams are actually working together to solve problems in a critical way. And it's that collective knowledge, as a team, as opposed to the single hero or the single function that is actually making changes in the way we operate, right, fundamentally.
One little comment on this. One thing that has worked for us in certain areas is we call reverse mentoring.
Yeah.
Actually having the juniors mentor maybe their managers and senior leaders on some of these topics, and that has led to quite interesting discussions and, again, a bit more connectivity between the different generations.
Just in the last minute, very briefly, taking it to the personal level. when you hear all these stories, partly very dystopian, others almost dream stories of a wonderful future. Where do you personally stand, and how do you personally deal with it?
To me, it's an amazing opportunity.
I don't believe in Judgment Day. I think we're so far away from artificial general intelligence and all of this stuff that you keep hearing about it. My only recommendation is for all of us in this room, leaders of insurance companies, reinsurers, consulting, is to go on your personal journey trying to use AI. I've been on that journey for a long time. Now it helps me with many different things. Contract review, negotiation, getting out of parking ticket fines, plans my workouts, has helped me to play guitar and so on. But I can't really imagine not using AI. And I think if you can use it, find where it works for you, you will be able to cut through the hype, you will be able to start then seeing how it can be applied in your business. And the moment when to start is now. It's on your phone, it's one button away.
I like the parking fine example. It's certainly a good use case.
For me, it's probably think about, think less about what you're missing out on and more about what you can gain. Very much this industry is not meeting end consumer needs. And it's become very, apparent to me over the last sort of 6 years. And I'm personally super passionate about that area. How do we actually use it to even just make a tiny, inroad into the gap that is still faced by many.
And I'm with my panelists. Use it, experiment with it. I think your lives will improve by using it, and your careers as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for a great discussion. I made some notes here, and it's normally at McKinsey we always say keep it to 3 messages, but I took away 5. The first one, it's real. It is happening, so it may be, of course, a bit overhyped, but it is clearly real. It must be business-led, so the AI transformation is business-led. It should be holistic along these 2 S-curves of optimizing your business, but also then leapfrogging and being courageous to take the odds of building the future. It needs real change in the way we think, and really, the unlearning, I think, that was also described by Andreas. It is about people and not technology. And overall, it's a moment of great optimism if we get it the right way. With that, on a rainy day, hopefully a good optimistic message. Thank you very much.